Hello and welcome. The states of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh and likely Gujarat are enacting ordinances which will do away with a whole bunch of labor laws. Only a few laws are being held back. Now, this has obviously caused consternation in many camps, including trade unions like the Center for Indian Trade Unions, which has reportedly called this a barbarous move to impose conditions of slavery on the working people. So the question we are asking is, how does this work? How, when you do away with laws, even if it is for a certain period of time, how will it impact employers and employees? Secondly, are these moves really anti-labor? And is that how it's going to play out? And finally, will industry come in or invest because of this? To discuss this, I'm joined by two guests, Dr. K.R. Shyam Sundar, Professor Human Resources at the XLRI in Jamshedpur, and also Rituparna Chakraborty, co-founder and executive vice president at TeamLease, India's largest staffing services company. So let me begin with you, Professor Shyam Sundar. How do you interpret these moves by the UP and Madhya Pradesh governments?
Well, in fact, I have not recovered from the shock of having received and read these extraordinary labor law changes, which I should suppose even the employers did not dream of, and nor they must have asked. So it's a bounty by the state government. The Madhya Pradesh government is a little more thorough and slightly conservative, whereas the Uttar Pradesh government has made such sweeping changes by exempting all but the three labor laws that you mentioned, which are under the state sphere. And these are, these, according to me, will neither help the employers nor the workers for three economic reasons. One is that the so-called COVID-induced labor shortages and the market space vacated by China, which should be occupied by firms in India, and the creation of employment and labor welfare are the three planks on which these ordinances and changes have been made. But they are not going to result in achieving these professed goals for three reasons. One is that when the labor rights and the dispute settlement mechanism channels or the bipartite consultation conduits, committees, when all these are may not actually materialize, how could workers or employers imagine a resolution of industrial disputes? That is one point. Secondly, is capital looking for low labor standards? I don't think so. The research that exists, conducted by the ILO, says that good capital chases high labor standards. And thirdly, are we competing with a low cost and a highly authoritarian labor market context that obtains in China with a pluralistic, democratic, and socialistic economy that India still is? So, on the one hand, the labor rights will be at risk. On the other hand, the employee dissatisfaction may not be effectively addressed, as all these routes may probably be shut. So, in that sense, it will affect the labor productivity and economic efficiency. It's a very simple industrial relations logic. I'll just have one more minute. It's a simple industrial relations logic that content workforce will be more productive. And by exempting all these clauses, the onus is put on the employer, and the employers who are good will continue to be good, but it will also lead to undesirable practices in the labor market, which will have adverse consequences that I talked
Right.
about.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you about the acts that have been removed, and by their removal, how does things exactly, or rather, how do things exactly pan out? Rituparna, could you how are you seeing it as someone who is a large or a significant player in the staffing services
Sure.
business?
So I think everything that we have been doing to murder the virus has been murdering the economy, and that probably is the right sequence, but it's not going to be easy in any case. And here on, all I can say is survival is equivalent to growth now. So for everyone, survival is the most important element. And in that light, I feel what UP government has done, Madhya Pradesh government has done, and what probably even Gujarat is thinking of. I may not have agreement around tenure, specific changes, and so on and so forth, but states would probably will have to replicate it. By and large, some changes based on relevance of what is applicable in the respective states, because I think at some point we employers today need that breather to be able to get back into the economic activity. And I think it has long-term implications, because without employers, there are no employees finally. And if employers
Right.
today, yeah.
So, all states are talking about a 1,000-day breather or 3 years
Yes.
effectively. So now, how does that work? I mean, when you suspend laws for 3 years, but after 3 years, it's going to come back. So how does that really give employers a breather if they were looking for one? Rituparna.
So I think it is essentially, first and foremost, the states have come in with certain changes, but I do believe that even the central government needs to come out with certain changes. And the ones which will be impactful are all now sitting under the Central Act. So which, of course, is a matter of consideration. So it doesn't end with what the state government is currently doing. I think it's also important we do have this thing where people are worried about the protection of workers. We have to understand that large part of India today are not touched by the labor laws in any case, which means that it's the formal sector which has impact based on these changes today, right? And if I were to look at the ground reality, over the last few years, our performance in terms of compliance and adherence by formal sector have improved significantly year on year, which means the need or the attempt towards trying to exploit has gone down. We have seen an attempt towards formalizing workforce, which means we are all moving in the right direction, and hence the concern that it would lead to exploitation is misplaced. And the ones who have the intentions to look after labor, because finally it's not that you can exploit it, you can take a one-handed approach towards exploitation of labor and prosper your business. I think in today's time that's utopian, that's unlikely to happen. So at some point, I feel if this leads to a revival of the economic activity and we are able to get back jobs and create more jobs, it's a win-win for everyone. I have a difference of view whether it should be 1,000 days or not. I am not somebody who's propagating we should not have any labor laws. I think we need labor laws. But what our view is that we should take a two-quarter approach towards this and then evaluate what our next step should be, because the next 2 quarters are going to be very critical for business. And when we are evaluating our normalcy, yeah.
Yeah. No, you and your colleagues have been advocating, reframing labor laws, doing away with labor laws. Now, is this something, to use the professor's word, in some ways going beyond what anyone could have wildly imagined?
Yes. Can I correct you? I think as a company, we have never propagated doing away with labor laws. I think, let me just give you some.
No, not doing away, reframing. This is doing away.
Yes. So 27,000, there are 27,000 compliances under labor laws today. There are 440 acts between central government and state acts, and there are about 1,400 filings. Our recommendation is that after normalcy is restored, there should be a labor commission which should be assigned the job of coming out with a single labor code, which is easy for employers to understand, interpret, and hence comply by. And that's how, finally in India, we need to decriminalize entrepreneurship. At the moment, there are 8,000 jail, if you break any law, default situation. You cannot survive in an economy like India with those kind of laws. So I think we are never recommending we should do away with labor laws. We need labor laws. We just need a reasonable touch of it, which actually encourages job creation rather than just job preservation.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to the laws in a second, but Rituparna, what about outcomes? I mean, I'm guessing this was aimed at achieving one or two outcomes. One is, of course, India's own industrial, let's say, decline, particularly in the last couple of years, and reviving that or building it. And the second is to attract investment from potentially a China where it may be fleeing from. So, do you feel that these moves address that objective?
I think it is clearly the second point that you raised is definitely one of the intended consequence, because people feel that there is a window of opportunity here to take away some business from China and attract them to India. And it's a great sign that states are now clamoring or competing with each other to be able to get a chunk of that share of that opportunity. And if it's a signal that is being sent out, I think it has positive outcomes for the country in any case, because even if you're able to swing some of those decisions in our favor, there is a long-term benefit associated with it. And UP, we know traditionally, for example, if I'm picking on UP, because UP has been a little behind, if I can say so, with relation to other states when it comes to economic activity, right? And hence, it's quite surprising to see UP come out with the aggression with which, again, I'm not getting into the specifics of which act, what should have been there, not there. It's just the signal, what it gives, and this is what I infer from it.
Right, Professor. So, as labor, they should be protected. Their rights should be protected. So, when you look at the Building and Other Construction Workers Act, Workmen's Compensation Act, Bonded Labor Act, and Section 5 of Payment of Wages Act, so which ensures timely wages. So, between wages and security, they are broadly seem to be covered in these 3 acts or 4 acts, or the 3 plus 1 subsection of the 4th act. So, is it then maybe time to have fewer laws, and maybe these are the right ones?
Well, I would certainly look for some empirical data to confirm what Rituparna Chakraborty has said, that labor law compliance has become better over the years. It required the intervention of the Supreme Court from 2009-10 onwards to nudge the states to form even Construction Workers Welfare Board and to spend the vast, 55,000 crore or 36,500 crores, whatever may be the amount, to be spent on the items on which is legislated. If this is the condition of compliance with regard to the BOCW Act, and what about the Minimum Wages Act? Even the government has gone on record to say that Minimum Wages Act is the least implemented act, and the exemption by UP government will also concern the Minimum Wages Act. And the Payment of Wages Act, it talks only about timely payment. It doesn't talk about the statutory requirement of payment of wages. By the way, let me also add here that while, this economic revival, is it largely impinging on rigid labor laws or supply side measures in terms of wage subsidy, easy credit, access to market, and opening of trade? Labor laws on a scale of 1 to 10, will any employer put it as a top 5 irritants? No. It is various other things that impinge.
I've got a question on that as well. But let me ask you another question. Conceptually, what are the 3 things that you feel are the most critical when it comes to protecting workers and employers and their relationship? Conceptually, what are the 3 things?
You see, conceptually, ideally, a conducive industrial relations atmosphere on the shop floor or in any business activity will require labor management cooperation. That would mean 2 things: employers' responsibility, self-governance, and labor rights. If these are given and these are assured, workers will feel responsive to the employers, to the legal environment. Now, all of a sudden, you just wash away the labor laws and introduce what I call labor market anarchy. Is this the thing that the employers want? I can understand that there are some irritants in terms of freedom to hire and fire and contract labor flexibility. Fine, do them. But occupying China is a very, very mischievous and utterly misleading argument, because China thrives on authoritarian labor market, of course, with quite a bit of social security. But these things don't obtain in India. So I don't think labor laws are irritants in any sense, and that given the COVID situation, that these two governments and Gujarat government should think it suitable to introduce the reforms that even the industry have not asked during the COVID times. And this is
okay. So I mean, COVID times are desperate times. So we'll come to that in a moment. Rituparna, as you look ahead now, these are of course 3 states, and there's the rest of India. And I'm assuming a lot of your staffers are not in these 3 states, or only some of them are there. So how are you seeing this pan out?
Look, I think we'll have to, first and foremost, I am very keen to look at the exact extracts, because most of the information that are available online through media reports and findings. Sure. So I think it's very important to go through the fine print behind what exactly is the notification. So we'll first like to evaluate that. The second element of it is that we'll have to also then, look, I feel that we have some sense of the real-time agony and ecstasy of the labor market. And from that perspective, I can talk that employers are extremely distressed today, because what we are witnessing today is a solvency problem. It's not just a liquidity problem. You have zero revenues, but full costs. I don't think any employer today, and with due regard to Professor, I think, yes, I think there are, I probably am not as much of an expert in labor laws as he is, but I think when I see some of the formalization data and patterns, if I see the registrations or increase in EPFO coverage and so on and so forth, it gives me some belief that, yes, there has been a positive movement towards improvement in the way organizations are viewing labor, and they do believe that being in the wrong side of the law does have impact on your long-term goodwill, your image as an employer, and so on and so forth. And it's not a path worth going down. But in difficult times, and I'm specifically emphasizing that it's an emergency time. What's happening today is unprecedented. And if we are not doing whatever we can to help employers today, tomorrow they'll just give up their hands, because they don't have an option to survive. And if employers don't survive, I don't know which labor relation or which employer-employee relations we will be talking about, because that's not what the intended outcome is. We have to finally survive. And I feel anything that we can do for the next couple of quarters or year to survive should be the primary focus. And I do agree that labor may not be the only way to bring us out of the desperate times we are in. There could be a lot of other fiscal announcements we should expect from the government, but labor does remain an important consideration because it's an asset that you do carry.
Right. Right. Last word, Professor. We're running out of time. So this is a desperate time. In any case, all states are saying that there is a sunset clause, so to speak. It's 1,000 days, so which means things will revert. Now, how that will practically work, I'm not sure, and we didn't have the time to get into it. But is this something that can help? Because finally, if companies are not solvent, they're not able to raise money, they're not able to take loans, and obviously there's a huge demand shock. What other choice do they have?
No, I see India has ratified the ILO Convention on Tripartite Consultation, C-144, which provides for social dialogue. and the state governments and the union government of India is bound by the ratification. Have the MP government and the Uttar Pradesh government or any other government, have they consulted the trade unions and called the employers before issuing these ordinances? So why can't the state leave the matters at the firm level, at the industry level, at the sectoral level for the social partners to engage in constructive dialogue? There could be concession bargaining. We have seen it in 2009-10 financial crisis. So this unilateralism and sweeping changes in the on the pretext of COVID-19, stressful situation, they don't wash. I mean, the representations by industry bodies must have piled up with all kinds of ministries. Instead of looking at these supply side measures, you are looking at a tepid labor law, which otherwise not implemented. Good companies will implement. I have to be careful about it. And there are irritants in terms of procedural irritants, which Rituparna talked about. But to throw the baby with a bathwater that is what UP and Madhya Pradesh are doing, and this will lead to me again a stress labor market anarchy.
Right. Ritu, do you have a last word? We have to go.
Sorry, only one sentence. Sorry. Yeah, economic logic simply says that industrialists, highly satisfied workers will be most productive.
Right, and you said that in the beginning as well. Thank you for that, Professor. Yeah, yes, Ritu.
Finally, today's time, our job is better than no job. And anything that we can do to ensure that employees today have a job without color or creed is a necessity of the day. And I think if this leads to more job creation, why not? But yes, next 2 quarters are going to be very critical for our survival. So
either ways, yes, absolutely. Thank you both for throwing some light. This is a developing story, and let's wait for the final guidelines as each state issues it, and to see how many states follow up and how it finally falls together as a federal state approach on labor laws. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks so much.